All right, welcome everybody to this CALA training. We have Janet Cornell, our resident expert and consultant trainer today. So this is some additional training we've been working on here for a little bit to provide additional administrator training. Today gonna talk about some of the paperwork that you have to do with between staff and residents. And I may mute you if you don't mute yourself if there's background noise. Janet will take some questions as we go, so I'll try to help moderate those. But if you want to jump off of a mic, unmute yourself and ask, that's fine too. With that, I will go ahead and turn this over to Janet.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I know several of you on the call. Some of you I've been in your houses and your buildings, so thanks for coming today. I did prepare the handouts for you. Like Peter said, he would give those to you because I didn't want everybody to be frantically taking notes during the presentation. So that's why you will get a downloaded file for all the forms. The presentation is really kind of split into two parts. The first part we put as let me get to it. The sky is falling. There, I have a client who always thinks the sky is falling because the state is coming. So let me get to my slideshow here from the beginning. So we named this "The Sky is Falling and the State is Coming" for a reason, because it really feels like that. You're drowning in paperwork. You're trying to keep your COVID stuff up to date. Your transmission in your county may have changed. It's just a really tough time. And hiring is tough enough as it is right now. So this was pretty well timed to show you what is your onboarding process. And then the second part of it is resident records. How do you do move-ins and keep things compliant and know that you're compliant from, and then you don't have to keep going backwards. It is really, really tough to do cleanup on some things. When the state finds it and then you got to clean it up, you can't get families to get in forms on time. It's just really, really difficult. So that's why I designed this to be a kind of a 1, 2, 3 on the move-in process of get it done, get it compliant, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. As most of you know, I was the administrator for 8 group homes. 2 were assisted living and 6 were secured memory care. Some of my documents show training for dementia care. You can change the documents if you want to. Maybe your brain injury, maybe your mental illness. You need to change your training depending on the clients that you serve. So that's why you can, you have access to those. So. This is the top survey tags from Steve Cox. Personnel files, they don't have all the documentation regarding job description, date of hire, orientation and training, first aid, CPR, verification of QMAP through the state site and other active licenses. You may have an LPN that you still have to go to Dora and make sure she has an active license. And then proper background checks, including CAPS and TB tests. Those are the top 2. They have 22 tags on that. 22 places have been tagged with that. 11 on the facility failed to maintain a personnel file for all staff and volunteers. You have to have an employee file for a volunteer that you've done a background check. These are not contract people like musicians. These are regular volunteers that are perhaps coming in to fix lunch or play games with your residents, that kind of stuff. The facility failed to have personal records available on site. This is a tough one because some insurance companies, don't want them on the internet and that kind of stuff, but they do have to be available on site. So when the surveyor's there, they can see your personnel records. You also have to keep your employee records for 3 years after the person left employment. So that's, they've only cited that twice, but those are things that they are seeing in the industry. Well, to start the presentation, I'd like to give you a little background about myself. When I first took over Millbrook, I did not have any management experience. I told the owners I would take it over as the administrator for 1 year. I was there 14 years. But what I learned in that is I hired somebody that brutally told me I was a reactionary manager, that I was responding to crisis every day We were running around putting out fires, and she said, "You're really managing these homes like your hair's on fire all the time. You're reacting to everything and fixing it." I was reacting to being low on computer supplies because once I put the ink in the fax machine, I should have ordered another ink. I wasn't. I was waiting till we were out of fax cartridges, ink. So that was kind of a hard day, but she said, "I'll just be brutally honest with you." She said, "We need to be more proactively managing this company." So that's running your business where you can adapt to challenges and you have a process in place to avoid causing yourself more issues and problems. So those were the two management styles that she brought to my attention. And I wholeheartedly had to agree with her. I was reactionary management. I think some of you can relate to that, and especially the picture of the gal with her hair on fire, because I felt like that for 2 years I did that. And that's 8 homes that we were just not doing anything to prevent problems. I was actually the cause of many of them. So we changed that. And so this presentation has to do with onboarding processes. And do you have an onboarding process? If you've worked in a big company, they have a human resource department that does all their onboarding. They have a process in place that they know works. I was reactionary on the left. I had no process in place. It was helter-skelter, just get them hired, get them trained, get them on the floor. I did it differently every time. I did it at different locations. Sometimes part of it was in the office, sometimes it was in the homes, sometimes it was at Starbucks. I had nothing in place. And I was guilty of disregarding CDPH regulations on the TB test before getting them on the floor. What this did for me is I had bad surveys. I also had disorganized employee files. I had to go back through and clean them up. And then it really wasn't setting a great example for my staff, especially your new staff. I was unorganized and they knew that from the beginning. So the proactive approach is on the right. You have a firm, organized process. It meets regulation. You do the same thing every time, so then it becomes habit. And then if you're training anyone else to do hiring, you do it the same way. And what you get is an organized employee file. And guess what? An organized employee file, then you get better surveys. Does anybody have any question on the 2 types of management that I saw? No?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. The first part of it is the employee paperwork. You have to get them hired, but it really doesn't start with the paperwork. It really starts with the interview process. Do you have an organized interviewing process? And really that's putting your best foot forward. And why would this employee want to work for you? If you're disorganized in the interview process, then they probably might say, wow, do I want to work here? And competition for employees right now is very fierce. So if your interviewing process is professional, you're ready for the interview, you have a packet ready to go for them, then you look like you're organized and you're proactively managing that interview. There is information out there that employees leave a job because the job was not what they expected. They didn't know maybe the whole scope of the job. So you probably need a clear job description and go over it during the interview with the person. And you are required to have a clear job description in regulation anyway. So I started interviewing staff and going over the job description during the interview. Now things have changed a little bit because you have to get people interviewed quickly. So this is the advantages of an organized onboarding process. It does paint a good picture of where when people want to work here. It helps new hires get up to speed faster. It helps be compliant with CDPHE regulation. It also promotes communication between new staff and existing staff, and it helps build some teamwork. If you have kind of the same process in place and you have staff that will call and welcome somebody on board, some of those things really help, especially if somebody's isolated in a group home. We started letting other staff that worked in other homes know that we started someone new, and they would call them on the phone, just welcome them to their day, and just stuff like that that can help build morale throughout your organization. If you have an organized onboarding process, it will actually help the staff feel more confident and they know what's expected of them. So those are some of the advantages. And they do say that an organized onboarding process lowers your employee turnover because things are organized and they feel confident that they know what they're doing. Now we have to do a pretty quick interview process. This is what I had to change my interview process too, because I was trying to schedule interviews 3 days after I read the resume and somebody already hired them. So I was missing out. So we started looking at resumes twice a day, and then we would schedule the first interview for a phone interview. It was I scheduled myself every 15 minutes, and guess what? About 1 out of 4 people actually answered that call for the phone interview. So you're not wasting time waiting for an in-person interview. You just, next 15 minutes, you call the next person. The second interview I did in person, and I scheduled them every half hour. And that's where I met the person. We went over the job description a little more quickly. In the first interview, I might ask, do you have a QMAP? What kind of experience do you have? Do you know that we are a group home? Some people didn't know we were a group home. Some people didn't know that my staff worked 24 hours. So we went over some of those things from the very beginning so that we didn't schedule a second interview for somebody that really wasn't qualified or didn't know what they had applied for. Then at the second interview was a little more in depth. I had them sign the background check and the CAPS check at that interview. So I could go ahead and run it, because you really should not make a job offer until you know they have a clean background check and a clean CAPS check. You don't want to do those, offer someone the job, and then their background comes back and you can't probably hire them. Then I started firming up my job offer. I would call them on the phone first, and then I would give them a written offer that laid everything out for them, what they were getting paid, what their shifts were, that kind of stuff, and be as specific as we could, because when you make someone an offer, if they don't really want that job, here's where I wanted them to back out. I didn't want them to back out after I spent 2 or 3 days training them. So we tried to get the acceptance letter signed and back, and then we would move forward after that. But all of that was interview first day, second day was an in-person, third day was a job offer because I could get the background check back. So you really have to start a process that works for you. Does somebody have a question? No? Okay. Decide a process that's consistent and works for you. If you're in a bigger place, then perhaps it works for you to have one room where you hire people or do interviews, that kind of thing. What can the employee fill out at time of hire? They would come back to my office and do specific things. And what does your orientation training sheet look like? I have several that I will give to you, and we'll kind of look at those at the end here. Also, what does your job shadow process look like? Do you do 12-hour job shadows, 8 hours, 6 hours? Do you do I did 2 12 hours if it was an experienced person. I did 3 12 hours if I was hiring someone I didn't think had a lot of experience. What can they do online and do on their own time? The problem with stuff being done on their own time is then you have to have evidence that they actually did it. And you also have to pay for people that do online training at home, because that is required for the job. Then I wrote down what we were expecting from the job shadow process, both day 1 and day 2, and we wrote it down. We wanted the staff to feel comfortable showing up, that we were ready for them. We also didn't want to overwhelm staff, because when the regulations changed, we tried to throw too much at them on the first day, and we had people quit and never come back after the first day. They went, holy smokes, it's easier to work at Target. So they never came back. So we had to slow it down a little bit and let them kind of process day 1 and day 2, and not make them feel like we were watching everything they were doing. That, can you imagine serving meds your first day unless you have a ton of experience? That can be a little bit intimidating. So we slowed it down to make it look what's day 1 and day 2. I do have that form for you of what I did for day 1 and day 2. Mine were also 12 hours though, so you might have to split it up. Also have them job shadow with a positive employee that perhaps likes your company. I can't imagine starting a job and they're working with somebody that's complaining all the time. And I'm guilty of doing this. I had no idea that one of my house managers was complaining every time she had to start a new employee, that we have such horrible turnover. Oh my gosh, why are you working here? So have them job shadow with a positive employee. And I used to think that was a given, but it wasn't. And then what online sites are compliant with regulation? There's CPR and first aid training that's compliant. It has to be American Heart approved and American Red Cross. Some of those are easier to do than waiting 3 or 4 days for somebody to get registered in a class. And when I did the online training, We paid for it, and the email the certificate went to was mine, because I paid for the training and I get the email. So then I'm not hounding the staff. And then I set up the password, the username, so I could go back in to see if they even started it. And then I could remind them, you need to have that done by Friday. And it's Thursday at 10 a.m. You haven't even started it. So I kept control of the whole online process, as well as the food certificates. And I can give people that information if they need it. But I controlled where the certificate went to, because I needed it for the file and to get them started. Okay, here's that dreaded paperwork. Most of you know that these are dated, and state knows that these are dated. The job description, if they're signing their job description 4 days after they actually started, the state will know that from your scheduling. I did have an employee handbook. Not all places do. I think a lot of labor attorneys would suggest you do have an employee handbook. It keep you out of hot water. I started the orientation training sheet in my office the day they were filling stuff out. We also talked about a TB skin test. If they didn't have the results, then I scheduled them right then to get a TB test, and I went through Concentra. They sent the form back to me. So again, I wasn't relying on the staff, because sometimes they, oh, I forgot it again, and they're on shift, and then they can't find it. And you've started somebody that doesn't have a TB test prior to working. And these are all dated. The QMAP verification, the state knows if you didn't verify the QMAP online before you started them. I've never really come across anyone that says they have it, and they actually have. Somebody thought they had a QMAP and they did not. It was taken too long ago. The I-9 form, you have to have 2 forms of ID, photocopy the IDs right there. W-4 you have to do for payroll. You don't necessarily have to have it for the state, but then I couldn't process payroll because I didn't have a W-4. They have to have a first aid and CPR certificate if they are going to be the only one on the floor. I would suggest add some flexibility and don't get dinged. Just have everybody get a first aid and CPR if you can afford it. Unless you're in a bigger place, that may not be cost effective. But your staff disclosure form, that's that form that says I have not had a professional license revoked. That is also dated, that they've disclosed they have never lost a license when it's, concerning anything with drugs. Lift assist, food handler certificate, flu shot, COVID vaccine, residence rights, and house rules. All of that takes about an hour and a half to complete. Then at least I started the process. I made a copy of the training checkoff sheet, because then they get lost. I had a master copy in the office, and then I sent the hiring, and all these forms stayed in the office. Then I sent the training worksheet with them. The reason I had a copy is if they got to the first day in one of the homes and we didn't have it, I could fax it over there and not start a new one, because then you've got, several different forms out there. And these are all the things we have to train on. This is an intimidating list if you share it all at once. You have to review the care and services that your building provides. If you're brain injury, you have to go over that with your staff. If you're DD, if you're senior care, dementia care, that kind of stuff, you have to go over HIPAA compliance, universal precautions, glove up, gate belt use. The state has pushed the QMAP verification and that kind of thing to us. There is an in-house test you're supposed to be having your staff take to make sure that you know that they're comfortable serving medications. In my homes, we had to do dementia training. The review of the policy and procedure manual, we would kind of go through that briefly, and then later on we would go through it to make sure they knew enough about it that they could go get the policy and procedure manual if they had a question. I also had a fun test on that, and there were some trick questions about how many candles can you light on somebody's birthday cake. And I would get all kinds of fun stuff on there, about 5, 1 for every year. And I would make sure to bold the word light, and because you can't have any lighted candles. So, Peter, do we have things in the chat?
Yeah, we got a couple questions.
Okay.
Hillary's asking for approved online sites for CPR, first aid, and food certs.
Okay.
You know some of those?
Yeah, you know what? Let me just type it in the chat right here.
Okay.
The one I used was CPR Professor. I don't think I have that .com. CPR, I think I have that spelled right. CPRprofessor.com does food. They do CPR, first aid, and AED, and it's about $35. You can put a credit card in there. And then I had it sent directly to my email. The food safety I did was, I did not go through the state site. I did state foodsafety.com. This is the one that restaurants often use, statefoodsafety.com.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the ones I used. And again, I put my email on the return documents. Yeah, and my little thing of my policies and procedure, Aaron, you're correct. You can have no lit candles on a birthday cake. None. You can't ever have a lighted candle in assisted living. So you didn't read my policies and procedures. Yeah, you can have candles in your homes, but you cannot have lighted candles. It's a fire hazard. I would go through the personal care log with them, what was expected. I had a communication log because we needed to let everybody know what happened. My staff worked 2 days in a row and then the next staff came. So we needed to put stuff in there like Betty has an appointment at 10 a.m., you know, that kind of thing. So we did that. My staff had to review medication regulations and refill medications. We were pretty strict because I hired some people that really did think you could pre-pour meds and you cannot. All of my staff had to be comfortable refilling medications and writing the meds in the MAR. Some places have a nurse that does that, and they came from a big environment, so they were afraid to write in the MAR, but we just kept on practicing it because you can't have somebody working Friday afternoon and you get an order for an antibiotic that needs to be started and your staff is afraid to get that started. We went over occurrence reporting. Mock incident report. I would have them, you know, let's fake the report and let's see how you fill out an incident report. I went over with them what a medication error report looks like. And we considered holes in the MARS to be a medication error. So they knew, don't be doing sloppy QMAP. They knew that if you didn't, you know, all the different medication errors, if you didn't write it in the MAR correctly, if it's supposed to be a half a tab and you put in 1 tab, that's a med error. And then if everybody right behind you, you put it in the MAR as 1 tab and everybody keeps serving 1 tab, everybody there has a med error because you're supposed to be more looking at the order against the med or against the bottle or the card and the order. And if you have 1 med book, your medication orders need to be in that med book, because the staff have to be able to look at the order if they have a question. So if it's in a separate book, the state knows it's probably not happening that way. I did person-centered care. I developed an online program for them to do on that. I also needed to make sure they knew what is a change of condition. You know, change from baseline. Do they understand they need to flag that? They need to let somebody know that there's been a change of condition. Infectious control and hand hygiene, that became very apparent during COVID. We also did our fire and emergency procedures, health records, advanced directives, where to find those. I went over the number to dispatch health and to say, you know, this is when you can call them. Here's what we can use. You can call an emergency call. And then what do you do if you don't know if you should call out? What are you going to do? I always advise my staff, if your gut says to call 911, then you do it. And I'm okay with it. The worst thing that can happen is the fire department gets there and it's not that big of an emergency. It's, you know, you don't want to call 911 for a hangnail, but I did not make my staff get administrator approval before calling 911 because I had 8 homes. And what if I wasn't immediately available and I didn't want somebody to wait? They need to know where the first aid kit is. And if you do AED, they needed to know who to call in an emergency situation. First of all, you call 911 and then you call me to let me know what happened. You have to train your staff on behaviors and communicating. All of this I have in a document for you. Assessments and change of condition. Practitioner's assessment, you have to know where to find the practitioner's assessment if the state comes in. You know, physicals, med orders, all that kind of stuff. And then I had a housekeeping form because I didn't want someone to not be documenting that. And then they say, oh, I didn't even know we had a housekeeping form. So we had a housekeeping form. So those were things that I got done through the job shadow process. Yep.
Janet, there was, it looked like Janelle answered, but there was the question about the TB test.
Yeah, the TB test
hire.
is only upon hire, but you have to have a policy for that.
It has to have a written policy.
You have to have a written policy on whether you will renew TB tests every year. And then if you say you're going to renew them every year, you have to. I do not know what the requirement is for Medicaid. Medicaid may be TB tests every year. I do not know if that is correct or not. Anybody know from Medicaid out there if you have to renew those every year? Maybe not. Yeah. This is what we did on day one. We wrote out, what are we going to do on day one? Because we're not going to do all those things on the page before. I also needed the staff to have some downtime and process this. We were guilty of running through a 12-hour day and never giving them a break, which they were overwhelmed and didn't come back. Not throw too much at them. Then I wasn't on location because I had 8 homes. I would make a point of calling them at 7 at night when they got off to say, how did it go? Well, I had questions here, okay, well, let's write down what you want to be covered tomorrow and let's go over that. And then I literally wrote down, this is what day 2 looks like. Let the new staff know what happens during when they take a first shift. Some people are afraid because my staff were home alone. I said, no, one of the administrators shows up the first day that you take a shift alone, allow them to give you feedback and are they comfortable taking a shift? I would rather they come to me and say, I'm not comfortable taking a shift. Can I have a 3rd day of job shadow? Than I would for them to take a shift and try to make it through, because that's kind of hair raising if you think about that. I'll just muddle through my first day. I also allowed the staff that after they did a shift alone and they want more training, come back to me and we'll do some more job shadowing, but you need to provide as much support as needed. It's a little different in the larger facilities because there's someone there to ask all the time, So I always set them up with here's the phone numbers to the other homes. If you should have a question and you don't want to feel stupid and ask me, you want to call someone else, here's some buddies. And that's when we would when somebody first did their first shift alone, the other houses would call them and check in. Hey, how you going? My name's Kimberly. I just wanted to check on you. Any questions I can answer for you? My experienced staff would do that for me and just call as a buddy. Well, reach out to me. Here's the phone number, or text me. Here's my cell phone number, And at the end of the second day, I would also check in with them to say, how'd it go? Are you comfortable taking a shift? And then you can move forward from there. And I was guilty of thinking the onboarding process ended when the person took a shift. I didn't have any background in human resources, so I had no idea what staff retention was. And we had no plan, We were just hoping we could get people hired and they would stick and that's it. No. So then we started doing a follow-up program. And we actually started doing a 90-day review, but we did it in steps. After their first month, we would say, okay, here's what we're working on, but you got to have an ebb and flow to your day. What can they expect? And so we would check in with them and follow up with them. We also showed up at the homes after they were there, maybe a week or two, we'd stop by and grab some pizzas and have lunch with everybody and say, are you comfortable doing this? But I didn't have any plan in place for staff retention, none. We used to buy packs of gum, and if somebody was really having a hard time, we would put on the back of it with the label maker, stick with us, it'll work out. Or if somebody knew that they were really struggling, with their home work-life balance, because now they're doing 24-hour shifts, we would try to work with that. But I don't think many homes have a retention plan. Do you have quarterly bonuses? Some places are doing a hiring bonus now. What about your staff that's already been there? They don't feel valued because your new employees are getting $1,000 sign-on bonus and they're not getting $1,000 for staying there. Your experienced staff that have been there are pretty valuable. I had staff that was there for 12 years and they were increasingly valuable all the time because they would help train new employees. They would call employees that were discouraged. We had some, what we called team leaders. and they were house managers a lot, and they would say, yeah, I had that problem too. You know, one gal on her very first day, 2 of the residents had diarrhea. She no longer wanted to work there. So the staff started calling her up and telling her their stories of their very poopy day. And then she called me and said, okay, how come I keep getting calls about poopy days out there, you know? And then it became lighthearted and she didn't quit, but she was going to do a walk-off after the first day because of that day. And she didn't know she could call us and we would send extra help over there, because in a house of 7 residents and you got 2, one wouldn't even keep her clothes on, you know? And so it was just a hard day. So that's what we started doing, is trying to see what are we doing on retention. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any retention ideas?
No questions at the moment.
No, okay. So after you get them trained and hired and all that good stuff, then, oh, and here's what I forgot this slide. They say it costs $12,000 to replace an employee that's making $36,000 a year. I was just amazed at that. I knew it was probably about $3,500 by the time you pay for the post on Indeed, because every time you post an ad, it seemed to be $1,500 and you got 1 employee. So I knew it was at least $3,000 to $4,000 by the time you pay job shadowing, all the time it takes you to go through resumes to find the ones that are good, by the time you find somebody to show up in an interview. But I had no idea it could be $12,000. This is from a benefit magazine called Employee Benefit News. It's widely known. It's about 1/3 of the cost of your annual money you pay to your staff to replace them. So if you can keep your staff and come up with some type of an employee retention program, that would be an interesting strategy session to have. How do you retain employees? I think some bigger places do have retention policies. You get a bonus for 3 months, for 6 months, for 9 months, a year. You kind of break your bonuses down. We started doing a quarterly bonus to help staff stay there. At one time, we only did 1 Christmas bonus. And then our owner was Jewish. So I said, maybe we should look at doing a quarterly bonus, instead of just 1 bonus at the end of the year. So we changed it to quarterly bonus. People that had been there a long time got a bigger bonus than people that had been there, 6 months. But we started doing quarterly bonuses for everybody, unless you had very poor performance. If you called in 6, 7 shifts in a quarter, if you worked 8 extra shifts, then we might call that, a wash. But 7 times calling out, unless it was with COVID, a lot of people had to call out because they had COVID or they thought they had, signs of COVID. So we started trying to do something like that. But how are they helping out? Erin said she had regular team meetings for staff retention. I think that's awesome. Somebody had a question earlier that we missed it. There are some great person-centered care trainings online. Colorado Gerontological Society offers some of those. I do know that. Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe we can do one on CALA sometime, a person-centered care with some handouts, Yeah. So, and then how do you keep your employee files updated? You got them hired, you got them trained, everything's good. But 3 months down the line, somebody's food certificate expired that was hired 2.5 years ago. And, how do you keep those up to date? I started putting it on my quality management meetings every month. We did management meetings every month, and we had a master list. Okay, we would look, does anybody's credentials expire next month? Because again, that's proactive, not reacting to, oops, somebody's food certificate expired, somebody's first aid has expired. If you find it the month before, you can give them ample time to get it done. And then we did have deadlines. You cannot be on shift without a valid CPR and first aid card. So you have 3 weeks to get it done. And here's your last shift you can be on, because it has to be done. When you do it that way, then maybe they have time to get it done. If you find it and say, oh my God, your stuff expires tomorrow, get it done tonight, it's not going to happen. And then it's outdated. We had an online staffing package called Find My Shift. We put it in there. And then I could look at it regardless if I was in the office, out of the office. That paper list works very well if you can do it for some things. I could look at it anywhere from any of the homes. I could get on the scheduling software and look through their personal record in there and find it when stuff expired. We started also doing a $10 good catch Starbucks card for anybody that knew their stuff was expiring that we may have missed. Some of my staff would call up and say, hey, I need a Starbucks card. Guess what? My TB test or my first aid expires next month. Automatic $10 Starbucks card for the good catch. It also made them somewhat feel responsible for their own credentials. In a hospital, you can't get in the door if some of your stuff has, because it's tied to your employee name badge, and you can't get scanned in because your stuff is expired. We don't have that sophistication, so we would do that. But we would also recognize people at some staff meetings that knew some of their certificates were expiring. So it ended up being a teamwork, type of situation. You can also put the dates in your Outlook calendar someplace and put them for 3 weeks before they actually expire. So you can be proactive in getting them, renewed. But without some type of process, your employee files will fall out of date again. And guess who finds them when they're out of date? It's when you haven't had a survey and you think everybody's up to date. Or if you transfer employees from one house to the next, their employee file needs to go with them to the new house, which is hard to do. So we would try to do that. I would have my house managers go through the files in the house to make sure everything was still correct. They weren't a locked box in the house because you don't want birthdays and social security numbers flying around and nobody's comfortable with that kind of stuff. So you have to have some process in place to make sure that stuff is not expired. Let me now click out of this. Yeah. Oops.
There was a question about, did you say you shared your policies and procedures when talking about birthday candles?
I did. It was in there. Yeah, it's in my policies and procedures that you cannot have any lighted candles in the homes. Yeah. So I had a policies and procedure in that. It is a regulation. So we had no birthday candles, no extension cords. We had all that kind of stuff. The right time to find those is in the beginning when somebody moves in. If my staff knew that there was no extension cords allowed, then they were the ones that were there when they were bringing all the Christmas decorations in and 5 extension cords in mom's room, to put up all her stuff. So yeah, so that's what we did on that. Yep. All right, well, oops, I got out of screen share all the way. Now I'll share some of the documents that I prepared. Oop. Let me get into Word here. I was looking for the perfect onboarding forms. I'm not sure I ever found them, but I came up with this. The interviews, these were all shared in that. Here's one of the forms that we'll give you of where we could find it. This is everything that needs to be in their file. You guys don't need to read it right now. These are almost all the same. They're just organized differently. But these are right out of regulation, what needs to be in their file. So, and then occasionally we would have somebody go through files and look to see if they were, complete. Then I did day 1. They arrive at the home and they get COVID screened because I started finding that people were not COVID screening the new staff. Everybody gets screened at the front door. Have the trainer provide a tour of the home. Let's slow it down a little bit. Here's the home. Here's the bathrooms. Here's the staff bathroom. Here's where you can put your coat, that kind of stuff. We reviewed hand hygiene and COVID precautions from the beginning there so that they were following the current guidelines. Did we have to have masks on at that time? Did we not? All that stuff. Then we would talk about the plan for the day and let them know what's expected. Introduce the new staff to the residents. This is how detailed we got. I had them, if we had some downtime, read through all the care plans. I had them sign the back page of the care plan to show proof that they read the care plan. Do they know how to take care of Betty? Interact with the residents, get to know them. Noontime, see, we had it all mapped out here. Locate the safety, the medications, Then went on day 2, come and grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk how your first day went, answer any questions. We looked at what proper shift change looks like, what's expected. So this is how detailed we got on the whole process. Have they served medications before? And are they comfortable serving medications on the second day because somebody is watching them? You do have to have a job shadow day where somebody watches you serve medications. I did not want you serving medications by yourself. I wanted you to serve them in front of somebody. I also wanted you to watch somebody. I wanted to watch you give somebody a shower. I wanted to make sure you knew what to do with a resident that may spit on you and pull your hair while you're taking a shower. I also wanted to make sure you knew you could never leave the resident in the shower alone because they could slip and fall getting out. What if somebody rings the doorbell? You get the person out of the shower first before you answer the door, that kind of stuff. So we also did all of that. We wrote it all down. Then we scheduled the 3rd day of job shadow if they needed it. And then their first shift alone, management showed up and did a fire drill with them. So they would know what to do in the event they set the fire alarm off, which happened before. So these were this is how detailed we got on day 1, day 2. If you only do 8 hours, then you need 3 days of job shadow, and you need to write down, here's day 1, day 2, day 3, and then by and large, try to stick with it, Here's one of my checklists. It has little boxes you can check. Time of hire, we got this. We got expiration dates. This one has benefits. Check it off. Notice what it says down here at the bottom. The employee signs this. I have been trained and understand these topics. The state's finding that when they ask employees, were you trained on this? The employee says no. Well, if you've got this in their file, they can't really say no when they signed it. You can put initials in that square. You can just check them off. You can put staff notes. This has error or advantages. It may be too detailed for you. It is, as you can see, it's 3 or 4 pages here. CPR directives, emergency packets. Do they smoke? Where are they supposed to smoke? Can they smoke in the garage? No. Hand hygiene, all of that stuff was covered with notes in it. And then miscellaneous, location of the policies and procedures and a brief overview, role of the state health department. Does the staff know the state health department oversees you? And yes, we do have to follow the regulations. Where's the resident census sheet? The state health department asks that every time you walk in the door. Where's your resident roster? They sometimes call it. And then we actually did some training after they were there for a while, how to be survey savvy. So this is pretty detailed. Does anybody have any questions on this? No?
No, I don't think so.
No. And then we have this one. I actually used the one I liked the best. Oops. Yeah. This is the one I ended up using the most. It's 1 page. I put the date in these first ones. In number 1, I put all the dates we did those. When did they have a first aid certificate? All the dates were there. Then you can see this is the date we trained them. Their job description. The supervisor initials would go in the first square. The employee's initials would go in the second one. Then I put in their hire date, their job shadowing dates, their start date. The employee would sign it and the manager, whoever trained them, would sign it. This went into their personnel record. And then I organized their personnel record in the exact order as this. The training sheet was on the top, then the TB test, then the CBR and CAPS, then the QMAP, then the I-9. It went into this order. So everybody's employee file looked exactly the same. The reason that I did that, it was easy for me to find or to tell someone to find something. I would say, well, the QMAP in-house test should be behind the gate belt, because that's what we did. That's how we organized all of it. So it really added a standardization. Some of you might be going, wow, this might be a little over standardized, but it kept us from being dinged on staff files because it happened over and over and over again. I had the benefits of getting 8 surveys every year. I know some of you are like, the benefits of that. There were benefits to that, because if it happened in one of the homes, we quickly would correct it in the other homes because we were running the homes the same. So you're getting all of these forms, so you can use ones that you need. My form says, you may not like some of the stuff that I had in here. You may not require a mock incident report because somebody's there to help your staff fill that out. You may not like dispatch health on there. You may not like, behaviors and communicating. We had to do that because we had a dress code. I don't know if you can have a dress code with Medicaid, but we did. We had a housekeeping form. So all of these were down there. The state health department does look to see if your job shadowing dates were before their actual start date. Their hire date is the day they do the employee paperwork. Then they have job shadowing, and then their first shift alone, you can all put it there too. First shift alone is their start date. So that's how standardized we managed to get things. Let me get out of these. Any other questions there? No?
Not right now.
You can now send non.
Janet,
Yeah,
I just wanted to add on the CBI reports, make sure that you have dispositions on there. So if you had somebody that was charged for anything, whether it's shoplifting or DUI or anything minor or major, it has to have on there if they were found guilty or not guilty. Sometimes the CBI reports do not say that on there. And sometimes they will ask you, the state might come in and ask for a disposition. What the regs say, you just have to ascertain whether they were guilty or not guilty. So just make sure that you on your CBI reports, if there are any charges, that you sit down and you discuss it with them, write down maybe some of the mitigating circumstances, and if they were found guilty or not guilty. Because I did have somebody get a deficiency for that a couple of weeks ago.
Yep, and I've seen that too. The other thing that I've seen is that you have to state what's your tolerance level for background issues. If you have a zero tolerance for background issues, are you exempting driving problems? If you're exempting driving problems, what if they got a DUI? So you have to put that in your policies. What type of background problems are you willing to accept? You might say, I'm willing to accept, shoplifting because they were, 19 and in college and somebody dared them to steal the Justin Bieber poster out of the store, which my daughter actually accepted that, she got caught lifting a Justin Bieber life-size thing at Macy's. So, do you hold somebody against that when now they're 25 and it does show up? I think they only go back 7 years. You also have to do if they've lived in several states, you have to do a background check in all those states, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good for everybody to have a hiring policy. I know that it has been asked, I've been asked for that in different surveys that I've been in. Some of them, like Janet said, are really minimal. Other ones, address drug use charges and whether they do random drugs. Just so, no matter what your policy is, I have been in, no matter what, it's not necessarily in the standard policies, but they do ask for it.
Yep.
So,
And what I was confused, when you do agency and you have agency in your building, you're still responsible to know what their background check said. I actually had an employee that we had already had in our facilities for over 1.5 years. And then she quit there and she came to work for us and we ran a background check. She had a horrible background check, including neglect of a child. And I thought, oh my God. And I called the home care company and they said, well, you didn't tell us I assumed everybody was zero tolerance on those kind of things. And the home care company told me, no, she explained it. So we let it pass. So if you have agency in there, you still have to know what the background check looked like before you can let them in your building. So, and if you have an open relationship with some of your home care people, they will let you know that, but you are responsible to know who's in your building and what their background is. CBI, if somebody wants to know if there's a good background check, we used to do Boulder Background Information Services. It was in Boulder. They were really good about getting them back to me pretty quickly so I could get the person hired Or in the event I forgot to actually get it to them, I could call them at the end of the day and say, oh my gosh, I forgot to get this to you. And we were a good client of theirs, and they would get it to me by the next morning without a charge. Any other questions you can think of, guys? We are sending the forms out, like we said. You can change those forms for whatever you want, but there's at least a template there. Did anybody have any feedback on day 1, day 2?
Janet, can I just mention one other thing? CBIRecordscheck.com. I think the background checks are $5 and you get them right as soon as you conduct the background check. That's not the CAPS check, that's the background check.
Yeah. People get confused with the CAPS check. CAPS check is actually in chapter 2, I think. And most of our regulations come from chapter 7. Anybody have any other questions on the hiring or how you do that? I controlled the certificates though, because no, that's not a question. I was guilty of letting people get hired and on the floor before I actually had a DB test. And then guess what? It wasn't 3 days late. They were going to bring it from their former employer. And then I didn't get it, and I didn't get it. And then I forgot about it. And then we got surveyed, and guess what? We never had a DB test for that person before starting a shift. So we did tighten it up. Everybody's doing the best they can right now in the hiring, crisis that we're under. So I'm going to guess I'm not the only one that's broke the TB test problem. I never, ever let somebody serve meds that did not have a QMAP. I never accepted pre-pouring. And, in the end of the day, when you start fudging on regulations, then it's really hard to say where you're going to stop fudging. And then you really have a hard time keeping your staff accountable because you fudged and you didn't get your, they just don't know where do you stop fudging on the regs. So, all right, well, we'll move on to the move-in part of it. The move-in process is about the same. Hope I can't get to my. Oh. You know what, Peter, for some reason, I cannot get to the slideshow.
Is the Zoom thing in the way?
Yeah.
Just move it out of the way.
What do I do? Just move it up?
Just grab it and move it. Anywhere.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could do that. Peter's trying to make me grow up and do my own slides. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, here's the 1, 2, 3s of a clean move-in. First of all, I have to explain, who do you think wins in the smooth move-in process? And 100% of the time, the resident wins because move-in day is well organized and less hectic for the resident. It's probably pretty alarming to be old and have dementia and be moved, or have mental illness and be moved, brain injury, all that. So if everything is well organized, the day they get there, the resident wins. And the family has time to help get their loved one adjust to the new place. We were guilty of doing move-ins pretty helter-skelter too. And I would allow the family to show up with no paperwork done. They were pulling apart the room and putting stuff up, and it was totally disheveled. And guess what happens to the dementia resident when things are disorganized? They want to go home immediately. But if they come in and their room is already set up with all their pretty stuff, and yes, you live here, and the family stays for lunch, and then the family leaves at 1 and says, I'll be right back, Mom, I have to run to the bank. Then we don't say goodbye in dementia care. We just leave for errands and we come back. So it's not I'm leaving and you're not. It also helps you start out on the right feet with your families. It builds trust that you actually know what you're doing at that facility and you're not, starting out on a bad note there. The facility also wins because the standardized move-in process will be compliant with regulation. You will know how to do these move-ins if you do the same process all the time. Staff will also be happy because move-in day is less stressful, and we know that stress spills over to the other residents on move-in day. I looked like the cartoon in the corner after a move-in because it just seemed like we took us forever, and we stopped allowing families to move anybody in that really was disorganized because we could never catch up at that point. Here's what the state is finding on their surveys. Resident records are not complete. They found this 30 times. There's face sheet doesn't have everything. There's no practitioner assessment or practitioner orders. The care plan is not complete. There's no progress notes. There's no MARS, or the MARS have holes in them. The external service providers are not providing notes when they're there. External service providers are PT, OT, speech, companion care, any of that. If they're in your building, they need to provide notes in the enhanced services section of your care book. The face sheet is not complete. I do have a completed face sheet for you. There's guidelines in what should be in a face sheet on 18.9 is the reg. There's more in there than I actually thought at one point in time. They're finding there's no policies, procedures for health information management. You can't even figure out what that form is, or that term means. It used to be resident records. Now it's health information management. It has to do with how are you managing the information on each resident? Do you have electronic MARS? What's your backup in case the system goes down? Some places you do know, even for EMARS, you're supposed to be keeping the medication administration records for 3 years. All of your resident records are kept for 3 years. We only purged once a year, so I kept everything 4 years. Then I knew nothing in the basement was, I didn't do it monthly. The paperwork is not completed upon admission. And I used to allow this, and I would not do it again. Make a standard move-in process, exactly like your onboarding process. You can make a process for this. Your move-in process should be the same regardless of who does the move-in. And it's the same process every time. We used to give the family packet. Most of my residents could not sign their own paperwork. So we gave it to the family sometimes a week, 3 or 4 days ahead of time, and asked them, all of this needs to be complete the day before we move your mom in. And we started putting parameters around them so they felt the sense of urgency to get it done. And then if I would check in with them and make sure it was done. When you have a standard process, it adds predictability to it, and your staff know in advance how the move-in will go because it's a little more organized. The process actually of a move-in starts with the assessment. All of these things are part of the assessment: the overall functioning and health of the resident, the advanced directives, the communication issues, the medical diagnosis, food and dining preferences, some restrictions, bathroom routines, sleeping routines, reaction to behaviors, daily routines and interests, fall history, safety awareness. All of these are part of your pre-admission assessment, which needs to be written down and needs to be in the resident records. What kind of support does this person need? Personal background to be included, supportive people, their culture, their spiritual needs. Some of that stuff needs to be as far as the pre-assessment. I do have a pre-assessment form included for you. If you do your pre-assessment, you can easily transfer that information into your care plan. Okay, here's some best practice ideas. Only accept residents who you feel you can care for and socially fit into your home. This is hard sometimes because when you're really down on residents and you have to meet payroll, are you taking people that perhaps you wouldn't take if this was the last room available in your house? I have been there before where we had 3 or 4 openings in a house that only took 8. And I was guilty of admitting people that I kind of thought didn't work out, kind of had more behaviors than I thought we should be moving in, but I felt pressured because of meeting payroll obligations and that. So I understand that, but it rarely turns out well. You also have to take into consideration the other residents you already have in your homes. If you already have 2 wheelchairs, you probably can't do a 3rd because you're not going to meet fire code. If you have people that are a 1-person transfer for a male caregiver that weighs 180, but you also have a staff member that's 5'2" and 105, she can't transfer that person. So you also have to be careful of what can all the staff do, because some caregivers can transfer everybody. My transfer skills were not that great. Are they insulin dependent? Do they take catheters? Do they need assistance with dining? How do they do with people with behaviors? If you have one person that has behaviors, do you need 3 or 4 that are going to be, you know, getting in everybody's face? We had a lady that thought she owned the home. So if anybody was willing to challenge that, she would have a problem with it, you know. Can you meet their needs and can you meet fire code? Because sometimes those are conflicting. Janelle and I were on a call with the fire department and they're really discouraging 3 wheelchairs in a home or 3 residents on hospice. They know you can't get that many out, you know, so they're going to cite you for it. And how many staff do you have on duty? You have to have as many staff on duty as to meet care needs. So if you're already stretched and your 8th move-in is total care and you have to hire another staff member, that's expensive. You're better off finding a different resident than you are, you know, trying to manage that resident that's total care. Somebody had, oh, Peter's answered that question already. Okay. So does anybody have any questions on really admitting the people that socially and fit into your home and that you can care for? Because I know when you're down in numbers, that can get kind of scary, you know. What does your move-in process look like? Have you thought about it? Is it, you know, who does the move-in? Do you have other people in your organization that can help with move-ins, or is it only you? What if you're on vacation, somebody wants to move in? So you probably need to have more than one person. Who does the care plan? I had the family start the care plan, then I would actually transfer stuff that I knew from the assessment, because sometimes families don't know. They don't know the place that mom came from is toileting her every 2 hours, especially if it's a son. He doesn't know if they help her dress, you know. Is the resident capable of helping fill out the care plan? And when do you revise the care plan? Sometimes you move people in and you didn't probably have all the information you needed. So do you review it after a week? Do you review it after a month? You know, I used to kind of leave it at a month. Let's take care of her for a month and then see, can she actually dress herself? You know, because mom came from home and daughter was reluctant to tell us how much care she needed because she was afraid she would get declined. Some of the stuff in the pre-admission, you can include those on this, you know, into the care plan. But you have to decide on a move-in process. What does it look like for you? Who does the MARS? Well, I wasn't serving the meds, so I made the care staff do the MARS. And what we did is we tag teamed on move-in day. I did all the paperwork with the family. I made sure the binder was 100% set up. Then you know, got it to the home because we had copies in my office too. Then I would say, okay, I'll take the residents, you do the MARS sheets. And she would go to a quiet place and she would look through the MARS. And then I would double check to make sure we had all the meds and everything matched. So we had a 2-system process there. But I had the staff write in the MARS because they were going to have to serve the meds. And I like plain English. I don't like the fancy QMAP language. I had the family and residents or the resident complete the paperwork the day before. And I know that's hard, but when you start setting up a standard like that, then your families will know. And right when they decide on the home, say, we follow regs and we do need the paperwork done the day before, because it's too hard to play catch up. When you're missing a most form, the family continues to say that they'll bring it, they'll bring it, they'll bring it. They don't, then you're out of compliance. We tried to get the room set up the day before. You know, have the family bring some pictures, have them bring some of the clothes over. And then when are you going to allow move-ins? Are you going to do 9 to 4 Monday through Friday? You know what? Those 7 p.m. moves are almost always disorganized. And I just stopped. I said, no more. We are not doing this. I also stopped doing late Friday afternoon move-ins because the family would say, I'll be there at 2, which then all of a sudden was 4:30. And then we've got, you know, Friday night, everybody's tired, everybody wants to go home. And I got somebody that has to stay there till 8 and work on the move-ins. I would really, really, really discourage weekend and evening move-ins. The reason is the doctor's offices are closed. And if there's a mix-up in medication, you are setting yourself up to fail on the very first day. There's a reason there's a heart in the lower corner there. I actually moved a resident at 11 o'clock in Longmont on Saturday. I had everything done, paperwork done, orders from the doc done. We had to sign acknowledgement she could live in secured. We thought we had this down. She only had 4 medications. Those are easy. And she showed up with a heart medication and we had no order for it. And I didn't know what to do. And nobody knew if she was taking it. The family goes, well, I think she's done. No, maybe no, let me call my brother. Well, he doesn't know if she's taking it either. And right then I thought, I have put the resident in such harm's way. It's unbelievable. So I had to track down the doctor, call his service, call his answering service, track him down. He was on vacation with his family and he was livid. He said she was supposed to be having the heart med and we did not have an order. And he actually wrote it on a napkin in a restaurant and took a picture of it and sent it to my phone. And when he got back from vacation, he called me to tell me how displeased he was that I was willing to put a resident at that risk. That was my last Saturday move-in. So I don't do those anymore. And I know families really, really want Saturday move-ins because they've already taken a lot of time off work to care for mom. I would highly discourage them. Does anybody else have any, information on that? Janelle discourages Friday move-ins are late. Those are tough too. Med orders 3 days before. That's a good idea. Yeah, those are all great ideas. But you can also get ideas from your staff who have worked in different facilities. How did their best moves go? I always explained it to the families. The best move-in goes like this. The meds, the Mars, and the room is all set up the day before. And then you just simply bring your mom over at 11 o'clock in the morning and let her get adjusted all day long before she goes to bed. So those are the best move-ins and we do follow the regs. So we're also asking you to make one more committed day off work to help us with that move-in process because we want your mom's start here to be good. We do not want to be starting out in a disorganized mess. Your care plan has to be, input from resident and resident families. It has to reflect the most current assessment information. You can't go back from a physical 9 months ago. It has to be a little more current than that. It has to have resident choice, mobility, independence, and safety, detailed specific personal care services, along with the staff tasks necessary to meet those needs. If you've got somebody that needs assisted dining and you do not have a speech therapist in there doing a swallow and a eval, you got a problem because we used to be able to do assistance with dining without an order. And you have to have your staff specifically trained on feeding a resident so that we don't have choking problems. Identify a formal planned and informal spontaneous engagement opportunities to match the residents' personal choices and needs. You have to have in their care plan, you have to have stuff that they like to do. And then also, is your staff reading the care plan? I thought my staff were until I asked and they were not. Kendall only does Monday through Thursday. See, she's got better constraints. Yep. No Friday moves, no Saturday, Sunday moves. You'll do it until you put somebody at risk with the heart med. That gave me nightmares for years. What if I had not given that to her? Do you have all the disclosures signed? These are all the disclosures that you need. How to obtain access to the policies and procedures, the resident's right to have CPR, minimum staffing levels, whether you have 24-hour wake staff, what's your licensed professionals that come into your building or are they available or are they on site? Whether the assisted living residence has an automatic fire sprinkler, that has to be a disclosure. Whether the assisted living residence uses egress alert systems. Those are the chimes that ring on the door. It's becoming fairly well known. Medicaid homes cannot have those any longer. So that's a problem. Do you have video surveillance? You have to disclose that to families. Whether the assisted living residence operates a secure home. If you don't have a license to do secured, then you cannot be restricting egress and getting people out of the front yard and bringing them back to your house. Those people need to live in secured. The resident's individual care plan that addresses his functional capabilities. Families can look at that care plan anytime. What's your smoking policies? Where's the designated smoking areas? You have to have a readily available on site, what was your last inspection? Families can look at that, and you have to have it available. It has to be printed someplace. You can't rely on the internet because then the families don't know how to look that up. So you have to have that on. And you also should have a most recent copy of Chapter 7 regulations. Those are all of your disclosures that your families are supposed to know they have access to. You can put these all on one form. I did not. I had these all on individual forms. So my move-in packet required 46 documents. And then families could never come back and say, I didn't know you did that. Well, yeah, you did. You signed it right here. I also didn't want to take 2 hours of the move-in process for them to read through all this stuff. I gave it to them. Here you go. It's yours. Is it more paperwork? Yeah. But is it faster in the move-in? Yeah. What's your move-in cleanup policy about? Do you have a move-in cleanup? Do you know? I don't even know if there is a clean move-in. Maybe I had one, but something is always missing. And can you send the resident home at that point? You probably can't. They already left the other place. So in the care binder, in the left sleeve, we had everything that was supposed to be cleaned up and who was doing it. If we were missing the most form, the family said they'd bring it back on Friday. Who's calling them on Friday when they didn't bring it in? The fire drill needs to be completed. It's completed by this date. Who's doing that fire drill? Who's doing the fire rating worksheet? Who's updating the resident roster? Who's responsible for doing that? Is it me as the administrator? Or is it the house manager? The resident's not going to add their stats, but the resident roster gets missed. I had a relief book in each house because we jump staff around. Who was responsible for updating the relief book? I also had allergy stickers and no CPR stickers on the binder. Who was putting those on? Allergies were in fluorescent orange so that everybody would know there was an allergy. And the CPR was in bright green, like the most form. And that was on the care binder. Who was putting those on? And I also dated the staff need to read the care plan. All the staff need to read the care plan before taking care of this lady, and nobody was. And 5 days after move-in, who's reviewing the file for compliance? It should be done 5 days after move-in. You should not be still doing move-in cleanup a month after the lady moved in. And it's so hard to go back, guys, and do resident file cleanup. I'm helping a company now doing it. Families never get that stuff to you. I mean, she's missing a most form. She's been missing it for 90 days. And one of the most forms, the physician didn't sign the bottom of it. The physician's out of town for 2 weeks. The fire department will not honor that most form when they come in because the physician did not sign it. So who's doing that? And I think 5 days after the move, that was our goal. Everything's compliant after 5 days, done. And then also, what are you doing to keep things? Oops. Your residents' care plan is going to expire a year from the time they move in. So where are you putting that? Where are you putting that in your particular file that somebody is following up on that? So yeah, so that's that. Any questions about the move-in process? It's a little bit like the staff hiring. There is a process here that we're following.
There was a question about the templates for the care plans, which I believe you have.
I do.
And then a question asked and answered, though, what is a most form? And Bill replied, it's a DNR.
Yeah, it's that green DNR form. Yeah. All right. Any other? Let's go through the handouts that I'm giving you on these things. Okay. First of all, here's a resident face sheet. Is there everything that needs to be on the face sheet? We probably had too much. We had blood type on here. I don't think you have to have that. You have to have this stuff on your resident face sheet. Allergies, med allergies, medical conditions, advanced directives. Do they have a most form in there? All that stuff has to be on there. So you're getting this. Families involved, funeral home. You have to know what happens to the resident if they should pass away. If the family doesn't have a funeral home, you say family has not decided yet. You do not leave that blank. It looks like you didn't do it, So we had all that stuff. This face sheet needs to be updated when you update the care plan every year, because phone numbers change, people leave, insurance. If your insurance changes, you have to update the face sheet because this face sheet should be part of your emergency packet. So that's let's see. These are all the forms that have to be in your thing. So we used to go through the forms and make sure we had all this stuff in here. Just check it off. That's easy to do. Residence name, pre-admission assessment, they have a face sheet, care plan. See this dash here? That's when they expire. And I would fax this to my office. So I had it. Lease agreement. Your lease agreement is reviewed annually. I don't think I knew that. Written disclosures. Here's everything on there. Fall management, you have to have that in there. Residence rights, house rules, all of that. So this is kind of your little template on what should be in your file. Here's the pre-assessment. Resident pre-assessment. Here we go. The date, the expected move-in date, what room are they moving into? Name of the resident, all that stuff. Allergies, what is their medical condition? You have to know these things before you move them in. The physician's phone number, what if they're new in town? Can you leave that blank? No, if they are new in town, you go by their old place of residence, their physician. Their previous physician, even if they're out of state, has to manage that move in until you get them established with another doctor. And then we would 100% of the time try to get them to sign up. They're changing doctors anyway, get them to do the doctor that comes to the house. And we would call that doctor upon move-in and say, we have a new resident that would like to use your services. We would try to get them scheduled within 3 days. Pharmacy, all this stuff is in here. Religious preferences, notes. Notice the resident's name is at the bottom of this, because if you drop this, you know whose it is. Here's their personal needs assessment. I circled things because when you're doing things in a hurry, you can just quickly serve, this is based on what are they doing at the home they were at. If they have difficulty swallowing, you need to know that. Dressing, what does it look like? Ambulantation, hearing, vision. This is a little bit more than I'm seeing in some people's files. Food allergies, what kind? One house, I actually allowed, we had gluten allergies. We had no salt. We had vegan, and the caregivers were just up in arms saying, what are we supposed to fix? Air for dinner? Because I had moved in too many people that should not be there with special dietary needs. Bowel, how are we going to take care of this person? Behavior, you need to know what their behavior is before they move in. We had to do some redirecting. Can the resident be redirected? It's really hard to move a behavior in if you can't get them redirected. You're probably causing yourself more grief than you want. Do they have communication impairment? Do they speak English? Is Spanish their primary language? All that comes under communication. Bathing and grooming, you should know this up front. How much assistance are they going to need? Are they difficult in bathing? You need to know that. Sleeps through the night, all this. This is pretty extensive. Here's all their activities. We could quickly, click off any activities we could do with them. So we know what we can do for our resident engagement activities. We can put some stuff on there. Okay, look at the bottom of this. I have read and agree with this assessment. I have disclosed all information needed to determine the needs of this resident. I bet nobody can guess why I have the residents sign it or the legal responsible party sign the admission or the assessment form. Anybody guess why I did this? Because families lied to me and didn't tell me their mom had dementia. Families lied to me and didn't tell me what the dementia was caused by. Alcohol dementia is tough to take care of. Somebody said they never disclosed that. So when their signature's on here, all of a sudden they might rethink and tell you about stuff that maybe you need to know. I had families that their mom wasn't safe to smoke without oxygen on. They didn't want to disclose that, So after I put that signature line on there, that got a little better. You could also use that assessment form as your care plan. Oops, we already did that one. That's the wrong one. resident file, face sheet, and pre-admission. Yeah, so those are the three. So these forms are everything that you guys got included. I think you can probably see this screen. These are all the ones that Peter's going to download you. The pre-assessment, you can use that. You can just change the title on it and use it for a care plan. And then you just have to change the signature line that you have your family signature on there. And then you have to have some, notes by everyone. But if somebody does want a care plan, you're more than happy to email me and I can get that to you too. So that is what we have there. So that was a lot of information, wasn't it, guys?
Yes.
Like drinking water from a fire hydrant, huh?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
During one of our surveys, we had some discussion about the difference between in the chapter 7, it talks about doing an assessment upon move-in.
Mhm.
And we were talking about, okay, does that mean we have to do a care plan or an assessment can only be done by a medical professional? Or so do we have to have all of that in the resident file right when they move in? Or, just a little clarification if you could.
Yeah, you know what, that assessment I presented there is the assessment that I did. Okay, as part of my process, I always got a history and physical. A lot of the bigger places like Brookdale, they were used to getting that anyway. So I copied them. Get a history and physical, because you know what, sometimes families don't know the medical diagnosis. And you've got somebody that, has some medical conditions you may not be able to address. So we got both. I did that assessment, plus I got the physician to give me the last history and physical.
Can I chime in, Janet, a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
You're not able to give medications anyway without a written order.
Yeah.
So, you should have your physician's assessment form in place, at least by the day that they move in.
Mhm.
I would suggest that you do it earlier because you're going to have to make sure the medications that come in match the orders that come in. When they come dragging all their medications in, you're going to have to go through them. And unless you have the physician's assessment signed with the orders on it, you are not going to, it's not going to match up, and then you're going to have problems.
You're gonna have problems.
And the pre-admission assessment, yes, that does have to be done. I've seen them done on the day of move-in. They like to see them done prior to move-in, so that way they know that you have reviewed and accepted it. Because as Janet said, you can do the assessment, the pre-admission assessment, the day they move in, and the family can tell you something that's really not true.
Mhm.
They also suggest on the pre-admission assessment, if you can maybe reach out to somebody other than just the daughter that's moving them in, maybe a caseworker, maybe somebody else, because a lot of times they won't tell you the truth, like Janet said,
Mhm.
because they want to just hurry up and get them in somewhere. But you do have to have the pre-admission, the physician's assessment does have to be on site at least the day of move-in. Same thing with the pre-admission assessment.
Yep.
But my suggestion is to get it done because they want you to go out and meet them first to make sure that they can move into your assisted living. The care plan is pretty generic. You can do that, and as Janet said, then update it as you go. But at least in the beginning, you're going to know, do they need some help with bathing? Are they incontinent? So that way, for the first couple of days they're there, your caregiver has some idea. Yes, they need help with showers. Yes, they need help with incontinence issues. So, you should really have all of that in place the day of move-in.
Yep. And then I actually had this, let me see if I can get back to it. I forgot to share this form. Staff have read and understand the care plan. There you go. This went in the file, so I knew that who had read the care plan. Too many times the staff was not putting in, and they just weren't reading it. And it was like, you know what, that was in their care plan that you have to toilet them every 2 hours. So yeah, so that's kind of all the forms that we have there. You also have to do it, you have to redo the assessment if the resident goes to the hospital. You probably should be going to make sure they're a safe return, because you know that seniors are pretty frail. Things can turn around in a couple of weeks, and perhaps they were walking when they got there and now they're in a wheelchair and things look differently at that point. So if a resident went into the hospital, it was right on my form, it required a different assessment. I also I don't know if this is regulation, but your assessment, we used to put it as a benchmark that the assessment was good for 3 weeks only. If the move didn't happen for 6 weeks, I would have to reassess because things can happen too quickly with seniors.
Janet, I'd also like to add, when they come back from the hospital or when they come back from a rehab, it may not be, if they're just in the hospital and back out, but usually you want to get signed doctor's orders before they come back in, because you can't guarantee that they are taking the same medications that they went in with, that they're coming home with. So they've had a couple of days in a hospital stay. Usually if they go and they come back, they'll send a prescription you can add. But if they've been in a rehab or they've been in a few days, you always want to make sure you have signed orders by a doctor when they come back to the facility, and compare them with the orders that you have, that you have on record.
Yep. And 100% of the time when we had a resident go to the ER, my staff would call me and we would know what hospital they went to. I would call the ER and give them contact information so they could contact us when the resident was coming back. We had emergency packets ready to go all the time with face sheet, most form. The face sheet has the family's contact information. We had face sheet, most form, and right when they were going out the door, we would copy the MAR sheet, and that would let the hospital know what meds they were taking. And then if we got them back from a rehab center, we called for a report when we got them back. Did they take their morning meds? When was their last shower? Because a readmit is a little different than a new admit, but that's the standard we used to set. And because I was able to come up with a process for this, my life got easier because I was no longer playing catch up and trying to chase down TB tests, first aid certificates, all the stuff that I didn't have, or the most form from the family. There is just a ton of paperwork. I mean, we're just drowning in it, and we never did get to the point where we were paperless. That has its merits until your computer goes down and you don't have the MAR sheets and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would love feedback on this. If you thought this was a good training, this is some of the stuff that we're trying to initiate, is that you leave the training with some documents and templates that you can use. Download them, copy them, change them, whatever you want to do. The purpose of doing these trainings is to help our industry set a standard of care and help them run their businesses. We are just, because of COVID, it has been so hard. So we're trying to give you some things that will make your life easier. And if you're a struggling provider, I hope you have guts enough to reach out through CALA or to some of us that have been in the business to at least, run it by us, that here's what you're struggling with. What do you suggest I do? There's plenty of us that will kind of mentor you if you're new. CALA has some good, rich resources, but that is our hope, is to be an arm of support where if you're struggling, you have somebody that will, help you out. I see somebody wants Strike Force updates. I told Peter about that because nobody knows what's going on there. Yeah. Josh has asked about going paperless. If you go paperless, the state health department wants to know what your backup plan is when your staff loses internet. Where's your care plan? If you lose internet or if you lose power, what's your backup? Because you have to have the MAR sheet, a backup MAR sheet. Some places have a paper one that they have, just in case. So then you're kind of doing two different systems on paperless though. So there are great merits to being paperless. If I had to do over again, my office would have been paperless because then I would have had access to those resident files regardless of where I was at, because I have done an evacuation before and didn't have all the information, contact information in the office that was correct. So there's merit to both. We have a couple more chats. Yeah, Janelle always has the staff sign it off. Yeah.
And I think too, Janet, people not to be confused, the person-centered care plan and the care plan are basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all incorporated.
Your care plan has to be person-centered. Yeah. It has to be person-centered. Yeah. So if you've got a bunch of check marks and no notes to the side, somebody doesn't neatly fit into a box, there probably should be some notes. The state's okay if you put notes in the margin. And if you have a lady that went to the hospital and was on a walker and came back from the hospital in a wheelchair, that needed to be written on the care plan. Do not write it on a sticky note, because then the sticky note falls off the care plan. I have somebody I'm working with that's a perfectionist. She doesn't want the care plan to look messy. She wants it to look all nice. So she put on a sticky note. Guess what happened? Sticky note fell off. And then she got dinged with not updating the care plan because it was on a sticky note that was no longer there. Kendall has a question. The state is requiring person-centered care education. Yeah, you know what? That's so frustrating, Kendall, because they'll tell you that you have to do it. And then they don't tell you who can do it for you, and what's okay to do. And then they didn't accept yours. Yeah. I know you're not the only one having that complaint for sure. I did some of my own dementia training and they didn't like it either. Hopefully they're getting that. Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention about going paperless real quick. I had a facility that was paperless with their MARS, and it was all electronic. The internet went out. They had a staff change. There were PRN medications. The staff was already gone. They didn't know if the woman said she didn't get her pain meds. The other staff member said, well, I think she did. And because they couldn't get on the internet to find out, they didn't know whether she got her narcotic or not.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mess when it came to the PRN. And also one of the staff had not signed off on the computer for the morning meds. The guy had dementia. They had to call the staff. Did you do the meds? They forgot to sign off, or the person would have gotten their meds twice. So it's a little bit scary during electronic bars. I'd be real careful with that.
You know, some places are doing it and doing it well, and they do have a backup generator. I know some bigger places that they don't miss a heartbeat when stuff goes down because they already have it. So you can do it. You just got to make sure you have a backup just in case, you know, because the state does want to know. That's in your health information management policy is what your backup is. So, all right. Well, I think we are out of time. Is that right?
I think that covers it. So